First of all, we have Drew Marshall. She's the Provo and Vice President and co-chair of the Indigenous Task Force here at the University of Calgary. She's had a long history of leadership in other post-secondary institutions and has a strong background in physiology and, is that how you pronounce that? Physiology and including receiving Coach of the Year distinctions and working with all kinds of athletes at all levels. And also we have Jacqueline Ottmann. She's assistant professor here at the University of Calgary in the Department of Education. She is now the Director of Indigenous Education Initiatives at the Workland School of Education and also a co-chair of the Indigenous Task Force. So if I can invite our co-chairs up.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and we're so pleased to be here and so pleased to see so many people in the room to talk about the Indigenous Strategy at the University of Calgary. I want to thank Shauna and Brian for acknowledging the land that we're on today, and of course, Reg, for the blessing. Terrific start to the morning. We know we have a jam-packed day, and so we are going to, sorry, Jackie, can you hand me the... We are just going to take you through a few slides, but I can tell you our steering committee is formed of about 10 people, and our working group has about 30. And I know many of us are in the room today, and we're so excited to be here because when you plan and plan and plan, when a day finally occurs, we're anxious to hear all the stories that people have today that we know will help really form what we're doing as an institution. Now, I know it's probably odd that we would put up a slide of why we would actually need an Indigenous strategy, and I know Reg and Brian have both alluded to the fact that many institutions of all sorts are doing this right now, and it's not just us joining the crowd. First of all, we think we have a real moral and ethical obligation to do this. I will say as part of Truth and Reconciliation, part of this is a really big education for a lot of us in the room who might not be familiar with Canadian history, and particularly the residential school issue. This is not a good time in Canadian history, and if you're a proud Canadian like I am, when you learn more deeply about what happened, it is not good. And so we have a duty and obligation to take part in reconciliation efforts. Secondly, you know that there are numerous reports that have been written for many, many years now. In fact, if we look at the 1996 report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, and you look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was written almost 20 years later, you see that not much changed in the interim. Truth and Reconciliation Committee had 94 calls to action, and it is time for us to do so. And so we, almost every single one of those reports included something about the very important role of the post-secondary education sector in reconciliation. And one of the things we think is really, really critical from our perspective as a committee is, first of all, to understand, deepen our understanding of the issues of the Aboriginal ways of knowing and being, and figuring out, quite frankly, what role University of Calgary can play in reconciliation efforts. So that's what we're setting out to do. I will say at a really high level, we started as a committee with what I'll call Western traditional terms of reference. We recognized very quickly if we really wanted to be true to what we were doing here that we had to develop a parallel document that indicated Indigenous ways of knowing and being. And we have determined that there are 4 phases. In our first phase, we really set out to set our collective purpose. And we're now in our second phase where we are gathering stories and information and really clearing the path for the next phase, which is going to be bringing the stories together and looking at the teachings and knowledge that have been generated and created from the gathering of stories that we'll have at events like today. And finally, we will move to empowering the spirit of indigenization. In every single one of these phases, we will mark and validate with ceremony, and you'll see some of that today. But I just want to say before I hand it over to Jacqueline that I'm so proud to be working with Jacqueline and Jackie and Shauna and the rest of our committee on this strategy, and really look forward to the stories that we're going to hear today.
Thank you so much, Drew. And I would just like to start off by saying that this is a very momentous and historic occasion for the University of Calgary to actually be engaged within a process of gathering stories for the purpose of developing an Indigenous strategy campus-wide. And as Drew just said, this is, we're being recognized now for being in the midst of this development, but this is something that has been in the works for some time now. And in February of 2014, in this same room, Drew did announce the commitment that the University of Calgary had towards the development of this strategy. So it is truly amazing for me, someone who's been here within the Workland School of Education and always envisioning something like this. To actually see it, to see people come together for the development of an Indigenous strategy. It's a dream come true for me. So I'm really excited to have the elders in the room, the students, the instructors, faculty, community members, all come here to take the day to share your stories. And I think going back to the web, the dream catcher that was in the image, and actually it's right in front of you in the booklet. You are one of those intersecting points, and we're connected. And so there is so much meaningful symbolism to that particular dream catcher metaphor. And the other thing is the land that we're on that was acknowledged today. One thing I've learned as a visitor here, I'm from Treaty 4 territory, is that this land is seen as in the shape of a buffalo by the Blackfoot people, and Nose Hill represents the nose of the buffalo. So the University of Calgary, and I see Nose Hill right outside my window, my office here. And if you see it as the nose of the buffalo, we are in the breath of the buffalo, near the intellect of the buffalo. So again, just a lot of symbolism to how we're situated and the responsibility that we have to that. And here, Drew mentioned the parallel document, and this is very unique in terms of strategies across the country, I believe. And in Drew's office is a pipe bag, and in the pipe bag are the two documents, the Western Terms of Reference and the parallel document, strategy towards the Indigenous, the journey towards the Indigenous strategy. And so this was validated and initiated by a pipe ceremony in April, and we did have again elders initiate the strategy. So every step of this particular strategy development is marked by ceremony, a validation process. Very, very important to our communities. And so here, this is the reason why you are here, is as Elder Reg had said, is to share your stories, and we need so much to have you share those stories, because that will contribute to to the development of the strategy, which will be launched in June 2017. And so far, there's already been one community dialogue, and that was on October 17th. And there were approximately 85 people that attended that particular gathering to share their stories. Very similar setup as today, where we had note takers and facilitators at each table. And so this is the second and the largest gathering that we're having today. And as you can see, again, there's note takers and facilitators at each table. The final and third gathering will be on November 18th, and that will be we're going to bring elders together. Very, very important to hear their perspectives on this whole process, and to learn of their desires for the University of Calgary. And in addition to that, we have had in process already an internal scan. And we have research assistants that have been working on literature reviews. And so each faculty has been examining where they're at in terms of supporting Indigenous peoples' histories, incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing and being into their faculty. And so University of Calgary senior leadership is very much involved within this particular process, as are faculty and staff. So the hope is that we're going to impact every aspect of the University of Calgary. And in addition to that, we have an online consultation process. So there's a survey that the public could log on to, and that's open till November 5th and 21st. And so we encourage you to invite people to that online survey, and always an ongoing engagement to the community. The University of Calgary exists because of our relationship to the community. Our vision, and this was something, and I also love working with Drew, because we sit down and we also communicate our dreams and share our stories. And so basically, as you could see here, the Indigenous Strategy will help guide and shape the future of the University of Calgary by meeting the needs and learning from the wisdom and knowledges of Indigenous peoples and communities. Through the strategy, an inclusive, culturally competent institution which includes engaging research, teaching and learning environments for the whole campus community will be realized. I think that's a very powerful vision, and it's a strong statement. So another thing that I would like to do is to acknowledge the elder that initiated the Indigenous Strategy, that led the pipe ceremony, and he's here today, and that's Elder Andy Blackwater. Is he here? I thought he was... Thank you. Gitche miigwech. Okay.